Welcome to the Medical Device Made Easy podcast. Here is Monir El Azzouzi from easymedicaldevice.com, and today we'll talk about EHDS. What is that? So, as you have maybe seen on the title, so I said that maybe it's a dangerous things for medical devices. So we'll discover that because there is some things for the industry, but there is also maybe some topics that we discuss about us as human beings because there are also some elements about that. So for that, I have with me Cécile van der Heijden from Axon Lawyers. So Cécile, welcome to the Medical Device Made Easy podcast.
Thank you, Monir. Lovely to be here.
Great. I mean, usually from Axon we have Eric van Eric, so it's really the first here that we have another lawyer. So great. So we'll have maybe another perspective on the discussion.
Yeah, actually,
And
we have more people than Eric in the office.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, it's Eric who told me that I have to have you on the podcast. So it was really great. And yeah, when we discussed about EHDS, we discovered a lot of things that are maybe could be surprising. So it's why I think it was important to have this episode today. But before we start, maybe just a quick introduction from yourself.
Yeah, of course. Same as Eric, I'm an attorney now for a little more than 10 years, and I've been specializing in everything data with relation to the life sciences sector and mainly medtech. And I have a particular fondness for these overlapping legislations that everybody keeps forgetting, such as the EHDS Act.
So mainly when we talk about EHDS now, so what is that? So what means first EHDS? Because we talk about EHDS, but what can we just unlock this acronym? So what is that?
Yeah, so it stands for the European Health Data Space Act, and it's part of the larger European the European Data Agenda, as well as part of a set of data spaces that the European Commission is setting up. And I think this one is the most important one where it comes to medtech. And that's simply because it brings together access for treatment as well as access to data by everyone who needs it for example, product development for patients.
So we talked mainly, I mean, when we talk about medical devices, usually we have the EUMDR in mind. Then as we are moving forward, we have more legislation that are, if I can say, in parallel, and we have really to follow also them. So AI Act, for example, or others that are there. So where is this EHDS in comparison, for example, to AI Act or things? Is it the same? Is it like applicable to everybody, but there is specific thing for medical devices, or is it not specific for medical devices and the same as EUMDR?
Yeah, so EHS Act really is a data act, which brings with it that really needs to fit in the data strategy of a company. More than that, it's similar to MDR or IVDR or AI Act, which are really product regulations. But all three, MDR, IVDR, AI Act, require a manufacturer or provider to process personal data, to train the AI or to do market surveillance, to do research before in the pre-market phase. And that's where the EHDS Act comes in. Because yes, we need to comply with GDPR for the processing of data, but the EHDS Act will give more access to data if applied correctly. But it also comes with downsides, which include provision of data to other parties. So it's really something of its own. It's unique. We're not familiar with this kind of setup, but I think it's going to change the life of manufacturers in so much ways that I don't even see right now.
Okay, let's look at that. So one thing first, is it a new act or legislation, or it's something that was just updated, like we have sometimes some updates and with more requirements?
No, it's new. It was published on the 11th of February this year, so it's so new most people haven't even discovered it yet. Because we're all up in arms about the AI Act, which rightly so, but this one is only starting to shine right now, and it enters into force, but it's not yet applicable. That we have a couple of years until we need to comply with it. But I think manufacturers will need all those years to prepare for it.
Yeah, and it's why when we discussed about it, yeah, I discovered a lot of things. I mean, when I read the summary of this legislation, it was like, oh, it's impacting medical devices on that way or that way, so it's limited. But when we looked really in depth, it was really like, no, it's more than that. So, so when we discussed also about something called primary data, secondary data, etc. Can we unlock also this term? So what that means?
Unearth the pulse of the medtech world with MedTech Conf, a dynamic platform featuring global events on medical devices, biologicals, IVD, and pharmaceuticals. Stay informed, stay ahead, connect, share, and elevate your knowledge. Become an official sponsor. Make your event shine on the map. MedTech Conf, your key to the medtech universe. Remember, the future is now, and it's at your fingertips with MedTech Conf.
Yes, of course. So what's important to know is that the EHDS Act has a fourfold focus: primary use of data, secondary use of data, wellness applications, and electronic health record systems. And I think for the general public in the medtech sector, mainly secondary use is relevant. So primary use is really the exchange of data for patient treatment, especially in a cross-border setting, but also within countries. And I think as we're all going to be patients one day, that's something we'll all benefit of, because having your medical files available if you break your leg on your vacation to, I don't know, Sweden, is of course very helpful if you're on specific blood thinning medication. So that's one part. Then we have secondary use, which is really the use of electronic health data, which encompasses both personal health data and non-personal health data, which is really broad, obviously. And it can be through a permit. A party can request access to health data held by another party. And that could be another manufacturer, that could be a healthcare provider. And it will open up data sets that were until now not available to us yet. So this is going to be huge. This is going to be the game changer.
Exactly. Yeah. So because yeah, when I think it's this part when you said that somebody else can ask the permit to use that, use what? Can they use my data with my name also? What exactly this
Yeah.
means? So what, and also why would another company want to open this door and take my data mainly?
Yeah. So let's start with the last part. Say you're working on a device that is focusing on a specific illness as it presents in women, so femtech in its most original sense. Or you have a legacy device which nobody is actually going to do any research into. Then obtaining data through this way without having to do clinical research gives you access to a data set that you can use for your post-market surveillance. Or you could obtain data to train your AI, have an additional data set, where you would now have to negotiate with all the different hospitals to see whether they would be willing to give you access to the data they hold. You can request it through a new competent authority that's being set up, the Health Data Access Body.
Okay.
And if they are willing to grant you a permit, the party holding the data, as long as they are either a controller in the field, in the healthcare field, or developing products or services for the healthcare field, or are doing so and have the availability to make non-personal health data available through the control of the design of the product and the related services, then you can access data which was previously unavailable. And that counts even more if the data was held by a competitor. So it's going to be interesting to access the data. Now, it won't be the data with your name on it. At most, it will be in pseudonymized format, but pseudonymization will be arranged for by the Health Data Access Body, which, for me, as a person, would scare me slightly.
Exactly.
But you can object against it. That option always remains open, although you need to get to the front of it, because if the data is already available for secondary use and has been given out, they're not withdrawing it.
So you said something also interesting. You said that the competitor can ask those data. So it means that I am generating those data. Maybe I pay a lot of money, if I can say, to do all those clinical things, etc. I get the data.
Yeah.
And my competitor that is just waiting, sneaking here in the shadow, waiting that I finish everything, he can just call, get a permit to use this data. And it's really like that, or it's more complex?
Yeah, so there are limited purposes, but training your AI and developing new products or keeping your keeping devices safe, those are all purposes for which a permit can be granted. Now, obviously, you can use the data only within the scope of your permit.
Okay. So when you say permit, so mainly you said that there is this health of European Health Data Authority or a body, or if I can say, that will be taking care of that. So you just contact them and say, can I get a permit, or you have to pay, or you have to show, I mean,
Yeah,
what
so
exactly?
you have to apply. So everyone can become a health data user if granted a permit. So everyone can go for these limited purposes listed in the EHDS Act to a national authority, the Health Data Access Body, and apply for a formal permit. And you need to meet certain criteria. For example, you need to describe how long you need access, for which purposes you need access, whether the data can be provided in an anonymized or in a pseudonymized format. So if you can't work with only anonymized data, you need to actually explain how this fits into the GDPR and how this why it can't be anonymized. And then the Health Data Access Body is going to review that and is going to grant you a permit. Now, one of the things that will be in that permit, for example, is who can access the data. Which is interesting if you perhaps come look at the data and get the idea, hey, follow-up research into this and this and this would be interesting. Or if you think, okay, but I know my notified body is going to want to see what exact data I used. So these are all things you want to plan ahead for.
Okay, I can imagine that. Yeah, it's now making maybe some people worry here. So, what this, as I say, we have this new law that now come into force. It's for health data. So here it's linking also with medical device manufacturers that are creating maybe those data or collecting those data. So is there a piece or part here on this law that says you as a medical device manufacturer, you have to now do that, or you are obliged to do that? And is there those kind of new requirements that they have to follow?
So there are a couple of exceptions. One is intellectual property rights. One is trade secrets. Obviously, data protection rights still apply, so some see that as an exception as well. And if you were the manufacturer of a medicinal product, then you could also use data exclusivity. But unfortunately, that doesn't apply to medtech, and I'm still not sure why.
Okay.
So basically, if you want to avoid having to provide your data, you need to either claim trade secrets or intellectual property rights, or you need to have all the data subjects object, but that could also hurt your chances to obtain data. You have to notify the Health Data Access Body of that. So they, in the end, determine whether there are actually any serious risks of the health of the data being covered by IPR or trade secrets. And only if there is a serious risk in their eyes, they can say, look, we're not going to give access to the data. From my practice as a lawyer, obviously this act has only just entered into force, so it's not under this act, but from Freedom of Information Act requests, for example, I know that governmental authorities have a very different interpretation of a serious risk with regard to company confidential information. So this is something to be wary of and to stay on top of if you're claiming any of these exceptions.
So, I mean, I am a manufacturer. I am maybe collecting those data. First, can I hide that I'm collecting those data? Second, how do they know that I'm collecting data and I have to send that to them? And is there like I'm obliged, even if the fact that I'm collecting data, I'm obliged to send that to them? So how is it working, all this governance? Or who is there a police of EHDS that will come and knock at the door? I mean,
so you need to make data available from meta catalog, and the meta catalog can be reviewed to see who holds what kind of data. Also, at the same time, if you ask a permit from the held data access body, then they don't hold the data prior to granting a permit. So say you're going for pseudonymized data, you ask for your permit, and then the held data access body, upon granting it, notifies the party holding the data. And they need to provide it to the held data access body, who provides access to the data through a secure processing environment. Again, creepy, because it's out of your hands. It's in an environment. It's pseudonymized if it wasn't before by the held data access body. So you just have to hope they do it right. But at the same time, it's a great way if you yourself are in a position that you would like to update your data set or supplement it. If you know that your work also the illness you're addressing presents differently in different ethnicities, to get data from people who are perhaps less participating in clinical trials. We all know that, for example, also white men are the ones who mostly participate, but they are not the only groups of people that are being targeted by medical devices. So there is a great chance in this, but you need to put a lot of trust in that held data access body to make this work.
Okay, and we said that many, as you said, so a competitor can get those data, or you can also maybe as a startup get those data to train your AI, etc. So this is really a possibility. Like, oh, my device, for example, is for electrocardiograms. I need to make some training of my AI about electrocardiograms. Can I get those data and I contact this body and say I want those data? So this is really how it's working. It's like a bank of data, and can I withdraw some data from you?
They are an infrastructure, so they go back to the person holding the data and tell them, you need to provide this to us in, I think it's 2 months.
Okay.
So obviously, short amount of time. Companies want to be prepared of that, because you don't want to figure out how to extract everything from your system and only provide the bare minimum in those two little months.
And so here now, I want to go for a notified body or for, UMDR certification. I'm using those data coming from this EHDS. So will the notified body verify that, or will they check something, or how is it working on those kind of data that I just collected and I'm just choosing?
You're not getting the data actually. It remains in that secure processing environment. So what you have are the results of what you did in that processing environment. Okay. I think if you need to talk to your notified body up front, because you need to know what they need, and perhaps you'll need to mention them in the permit request, in the application that you're filing, because you can't just have them look into the system. At least not under the rules of the EHDS Act. I'm sure there are practical ways around that, but that's of course not the intent here.
So the EHDS is another law. So the notified body should be like qualified for that, or like the AI Act or other things. So
they're not mentioned.
Okay.
They don't have a role here. This is really just how to get data and nothing more.
Okay, so then they will not check that. I mean, even if they are checking, it's not like they have to have some people specialized on this to verify that you are doing that correctly and working correctly.
I would imagine that I would at least want to know what's happening and what kind of output is coming out of this. But if I were a provider of an AI system and the manufacturer of a medical device, then I would go to my notified body up front and say, look, we're going to request this kind of data. What do you need from us to prove that we got the data that you actually need to see for us to get through the whole process under MDR, IVDR, and/or AI Act? And maybe your notified body says, okay, I'm good with the statistical outcomes or the anonymized results. Great, perfect. But if they don't, then you need to consider, do I need to mention them as parties that need access to the data in my permit? And at what point in time do I need to get them that access? Because you also won't have access forever. You will have access until the time mentioned in your permit lapses. So this really requires you to have a really good strategy and a really good conversation with your notified body.
Okay, so yeah, here we have, as I said, let's go back. EU MDR, AI Act, GDPR. We have a bunch of things about that. So, how, as let's say, I'm a quality manager, if I can say, or a regulatory affairs manager on this company. So, how should I deal with all that here? So, it's like, should I have one person for each thing, or is one person able to manage everything? Or I mean, it's like it starts to be like a lot of things to do.
Yeah. If you're the one person dealing with all of this, I am so very sorry for you
Okay.
because you won't be able. This is really is a lot. Now, I think EHDS Act in particular requires integration into other strategies. You don't address this on its own. Obviously, it ties into GDPR simply because you now have, if you're requested to provide data, you have a legal obligation here. But that needs to be in your ICFs already. I mean, it doesn't apply until 2029, but still, you need to your data. If you collect it now, you need to keep it for God knows how many years. So you already want the data subject to be informed that you might have to provide it later. But if you're requesting data, then obviously you still need to apply a legal basis because you're still in that secure processing environment. If it's not anonymized, you are still processing personal data and the full GDPR applies. So at minimum, you need to address this in the scope of your GDPR strategy. Then there is the security aspect with regards to the exceptions, but also with regard to how do I take it out of my system safely without giving them more than strictly necessary. So that's also probably something IT needs to look at. Then
So,
obviously the data collection and the training of the AI, that's mostly something with product design and product development. So what you want to avoid is thinking in silos. I know that mainly large companies are struggling with this, but with the overall EU both product regulations and the data strategy, I think silos need to become something of the past. Because if you think in silos, you're not going to set up a comprehensive strategy that allows you to address this in a way that it both works for you and protects you as much as possible.
so you have really to have the different teams talk together and link
Oh,
together
yes.
all the data or all the information and not say, oh, I'm regulatory, so I'm just taking care of EUMDR, or I'm a safety officer, so I will just take care of GDPR, or I'm etc. So there should be like a
Yeah.
consortium or like a
If
link
you
or
don't talk, if you don't talk, I think you're going to pay your lawyer a very nice Porsche in the end because something is bound to go wrong. And honestly, I hate Porsches. I really like people to get to the front of this because I think it is easy. It is rather easy to integrate if you just take the time to think it through and address it already, so that you don't have to go back to your data subject. Oh, by the way, we need to provide data to God knows who. Um, you don't need to think about, hey, we need additional data. Why on earth didn't we think about that Health Data Space Act where we can just get access? Because in the end, what I hear from the market is the hospitals are being difficult. They are asking incredible amounts of money for a little bit of data that's useless on its own, or they only want to give it to us as a processor, which obviously doesn't work if we need it for PMS purposes. So these are all things you can tackle if you just take a look at the EHDS Act.
okay. Um, so the one of the question, if I can say, on all this is like, okay, there are some data that they are collecting my data, for example. How can I be also sure that they are not making some misuse or wrong use or even using the data against me, if I can say so? So
So
is there a protection here or safeguard or?
yeah, there are a couple of uses that are strictly prohibited, and one is making decisions to the detriment of the data subject. So that's the technical legal protection here. You obviously also have the Health Data Access Body that reviews what's happening to
Okay.
the data with regard to the application. So they need to decide whether that's actually a worthwhile use of the data. And then obviously, if you don't trust them, you can object.
But I mean, I can object if I know that they are
You can
collecting
object
my
in general.
data. If they tell me, oh, will you take the data, so I will have to use them for that, etc. But when you go sometime to a doctor, they take your, if I can say, parameters, physiological parameters, and they collect those data, but they have not tell me, oh, I'm collecting those data. Can I use it? So
They
is there an
should, though.
obligation also that they have to tell us, or?
Yeah, so obviously, if someone processes your personal data as a controller, they need to tell you. They need to inform you. Hospitals usually do that with a folder at front door, so nobody reads it.
Okay.
But yeah, that's their way of fulfilling their informational obligations under GDPR. If they're sharing it with a new party who's also becoming a controller, they also need to inform you. Hospitals hate that in practice because it's a lot of additional administrative hassle for which they don't have time. So I think for hospitals or physicians, they will just include it in general patient information somewhere in a single sentence. If you're a manufacturer collecting data, you are probably doing that through an ICF or through your own app, and you have an informational opportunity. And I think you should start using it if you're a manufacturer, and you should start using it right now. Then if the data is obtained by another manufacturer, there's also an informational obligation on that manufacturer because they will become the controllers of that data. And I think that obligation is actually fulfilled on their behalf by the Health Data Access Body. So we'll have to see how that works in practice. And I'm not sure if I were the receiving manufacturer, whether I would put much stock into the Health Data Access Body doing that in a way that works for me. So I would probably also try to set up my own informational notices on my website. But this is the way it's going to look. And I think there will be a lot of people who will not be informed simply because they don't read the information the hospital gives them, or they just sign the consent form because they want to be part of a trial. But formally, they have been informed, unfortunately.
Okay. Hey, just a second. Do you need a EU, Swiss or UK representative? Then choose Easy Medical Device. We can represent you and also become your importer. Contact us at eo@easymedicaldevice.com. Yeah, so it's like when you are going to a website, they put the terms of use. You have just to click at the bottom, say yes, I read. When you have not read at all, so it's that way. So
pretty much the same.
Okay, this is, if I can say, the wrong side or the side that we don't like. But maybe we can benefit from all those collection of data. For example, rare disease or things that we can really collect data that will help us to maybe get some better treatment or whatever. So it's also the good side of it.
Yes, of course. And I think even if you're doing your own clinical investigations as a manufacturer, it does help you to get a more complete data set. So especially as I mentioned with regard to the ethnicities where the disease presents differently, or if there's difference between men and women are underrepresented in the participants in your trial database, then you actually get access to so much information if you use this right to really position your device better. So it is an opportunity, but it's just an opportunity where you also need to carefully consider the downsides of.
So if now I am a manufacturer, I'm listening to all this and I'm collecting a lot of data, do a lot of things, etc. What do you advise me to do first? What kind of review I should do first for all those things? So where should I start here?
Make sure that you know what data you hold.
Okay.
Which data is subject to the EHDS, because your mind automatically goes to the trial data or to the data you collect through your own app. But it also applies to things like device data that you collected with regard to support requests. Because the non-personal health data is just as much covered by this act as the personal health data is. So say, for example, you have information on, looking at categories now, you have a wellness application also, which is not a medical device, but obviously still collects health data in some form. That's covered. Anything that you generate automatically through your own device, that's covered. If you have aggregated information about healthcare needs of persons, that's also relevant and covered. It's really a really broad scope, and I think companies will too easily look at just the personal data, but everything non-personal, because other health data is covered, and that's really broad, and that could be all the technical information about we had some X number of patients, and the general weight was this. So that's not necessarily personal data if you don't combine it with patient data, but it could still be relevant.
So now I'm thinking of like a company called like we have all our smartphones and it's collecting those data, those steps, or maybe how we slept, or etc. So those kind of information. So also those companies that are not medical companies that are collecting those data should follow the EHDS, or they are excluded from that because they are not really in the health business.
Well, wellness apps are actually regulated by the EHDS Act, so in that respect, they should already pay attention. But also, if we look at the definition of health data holder, that includes developing or manufacturing wellness applications, or if you're just performing research in relation to healthcare. So I hope everyone's CROs are processors and not controllers, because otherwise they'll be covered. And also, there are a couple of risks that we didn't discuss yet. Say you are conducting research with a couple of hospitals in the EU.
Yeah.
A multi-site trial, and you are of the opinion that the data is subject to intellectual property rights. If I wanted to be nasty as a competitor and I really wanted to get your data, I wouldn't target you. I would target the sites with my application, because they might not realize. So you also need to talk to the sites if you're conducting research and make very sure that they A, inform you, B, understand what's covered by the trade secrets or intellectual property rights, and C, don't do anything before you've had a very good discussion with them if they receive a request for an application.
So yeah, this relationship also with the centers or the that are doing this activity, you have really to really sign a contract or something where it's really mentioned what they can do or not do, etc. So it's you have to protect yourself also.
You can't tell them what they can't do, I think,
Okay.
because obviously they are individually subject to the EHDS Act, but you can at least make sure that they talk to you, that you are informed, and that you can take a measure. So you file for an injunction or something if you think this data is covered by your intellectual property rights.
I mean, here we talk about manufacturers, okay?
Yeah.
Health hospitals, etc. So this is also on the scope here. But
Yes.
Will there be a campaign of information for those healthcare institutions, or is something they will discover one day because a lawyer sent them a letter saying, "Oh, you should do this or you should do that," etc. I mean, how this information, do you know? I mean, maybe you don't know, but how this information will be spread about all what we are talking about? Because as we said, everybody's focusing on maybe UMDR or AI Act or whatever, but here this small thing is coming, but apparently it's really a big thing at the end.
Yes. So, to my knowledge, but I might be missing something, I haven't seen much with regard to informational campaigns.
Okay.
However, secondary use will enter into force somewhere 2029. So that might still be upcoming. First, we have the national governments who need to set up the infrastructures both for secondary use and primary use. So that's really the focus at this moment. And also, I think the hospitals are very much more working with primary use at the moment, because that directly impacts their provision of healthcare, whereas this is just nice for the academic hospitals who do research. Most hospitals most local hospitals don't necessarily get to do research that much, so they're less interested in it. I don't think it's on their radar that much. But also, I mean, this is only on the radar of nerds like me, because I saw this coming and I saw this exploding. And I know that there were a lot of regulatory affairs professionals who were also excited about this initially, because they thought, okay, this is going to resolve the PMS issue. But this is not on the radar of many people yet, or at least not on the radar of as many people as it should be.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's why, yeah, let's, I hope this episode will help them to understand all what is happening and just to make their own research again and be prepared for maybe this thing. So as a maybe a conclusion sentence so here. So can you tell me maybe one of the biggest opportunity and maybe also one of the biggest risk or threats of the EHDS that you can maybe inform the audience here? I mean, maybe it's just a summary of what we said, but just to see your summary, your conclusion on this.
Okay, so maybe let's start with the scary thing first, so that I can end on a positive note. So I hope I've sufficiently scared people in this conversation with you. But I think if you want to go doomsday scenario, you have the EHDS Act, you have the Freedom of Information Act request, you have the Data Governance Act, you have the Data Act, you have this whole scala of legislation in member states. You have a European Freedom of Information Act. If you bring everything together and you take into account the metadata catalog, as a competitor, you can get so much data about the company. I wouldn't know why you would want it, but you could in theory. At the same time, this is going to give research and development of health AIs such a gigantic boost if they apply the EHDS Act correctly in the way it's intended. Because we can get access to so much data we didn't even know existed, because we are not in contact with all the hospitals in Europe. If you're working on rare diseases, this is brilliant because you can bring all the data together without having to negotiate with everyone. So there is a golden opportunity. You just need to think about risks as well.
So just a last thing also. Here we talk mainly about Europe. So is a company outside of Europe also capable to collect those data or to access those data, or it's not restricted to European companies or, I mean, people that are following the European laws?
Yeah, so this really is a system set up in Europe. Third countries can, under certain circumstances, subscribe to this and then also need to share data. I don't see that happening really fast. However, say you are a manufacturer in the US or somewhere in Asia, I don't really mind where you are as long as you're outside of the European Economic Area, and you're conducting research here, your sites are covered. They need to comply with this. If you have European daughters that are controllers of health data, they are subject to this. That doesn't mean that you automatically can get access to data, but there are ways to apply the EHDS Act and then get results, the anonymized results, and at the same time also brings your data into scope simply due to where the data is held. So yeah, there isn't an extraterritorial scope so much as we see with the product legislations and with the GDPR, but at the same time, you can kind of recreate one.
Okay, so yeah, it's as I said, a big thing here. So I think today we tried just to make a summary or scare people, if I can say, just to have for them to make more search about it. But yeah, I think we have people really have to deep dive on this kind of topic, on what data, as you mentioned, what data they are collecting, what data they are using, so that they are knowing if they are impacted or not, or how they may be impacted also by this. The fact that, as I said, the competitors can access this data also is something that maybe some people are saying, oh, I don't want my competitor to look at that. So maybe it's something that you have to be also informed about. Okay, so now maybe how, as I said, we scared everybody. So how can you help them now? Let's make the bright side now here.
Yeah, so I think companies should start internally because they need to check what they have and what they need to make available. But then at that point, after that, they need to think about strategies. They need to think about how to align this with a GDPR strategy. They need to think about how to align this with the PMS strategy and with the training data requirements under the AI Act. And these are all kinds of things that I work with, but also things that they need to pay attention to. So I think they want to start thinking about strategies and discuss that with their lawyers.
Yeah, so don't hesitate to contact Cécile then in that case. She's specialized on that. She can guide you and help you for that. So I put all your details on the show notes. I also put on the show notes the EHDS website and some information about it. So yeah, we'll put also more detail about that. So I hope, yeah, this opens the eyes of cancer of manufacturers and maybe also of human beings, because as you say, we are read the small lines on your when you sign a form at the hospital and understand if they are using your data, etc. And this can be
And it
I
is
mean, you
in our
can agree, it's not a
favor.
problem.
If in the end, as patients, I think the healthcare market is going to get better, because the access to data also means development of better products that are better fitting for more people.
Exactly.
So as a patient, I wouldn't even necessarily immediately go to objecting, because I think I will profit in the end. And if not me, then another patient.
Exactly, yeah. Okay, so thank you, Cécile. It was really a pleasure. I hope, as I said, we provided a lot of information to people to be aware of this EHDS. And let's see if we have some news afterwards, and maybe we'll contact you back to have some updates about this law. So, Cécile, thank you very much, and I wish you a nice day.
It was a pleasure.
Thanks.